The warning lights flashed red across the monitoring station's control room. Commander Vorth couldn't believe what he was seeing on his screen. Something massive was moving through Crithian space, and it was moving fast. Really fast. Faster than anything they had ever recorded before. He leaned closer to his display, squinting at the energy readings. His 4 eyes widened in shock. This wasn't just some merchant vessel that had wandered off course. The signature indicated a warship. A big one. But when he checked the identification database, nothing matched. Not the Zelkins. Not the Tordax Raiders. Not any known species in the entire galaxy. Lieutenant Kresh, run that scan again, Vorth ordered, his voice tight with tension. Check for system errors. This can't be right. The young lieutenant's claws clicked rapidly across his console. Running full diagnostic now, Commander. A moment passed. Then another. Sir, the scan is clean. No errors detected. The reading is accurate. Vorth felt his blood run cold. In his 20 years of monitoring this sector, he'd never seen anything like this. He immediately contacted the neighboring stations, hoping they would tell him his equipment was malfunctioning. They didn't. Station Gamma 7 confirmed the reading. So did Station Epsilon 3. Within minutes, all 5 deep space monitoring stations along the Helios sector border were reporting the same thing. An unknown warship was traveling through Crithian territory at 0.8 light speed. That was nearly impossible. Even the Empire's fastest interceptors could only manage 0.5 at maximum burn. Get me Imperial Command, Vorth said, trying to keep the fear out of his voice. Priority Alpha. We have an unidentified hostile entering core space. The message shot through the Empire's communication network, racing from the outer rim to the capital world of Crithios Prime. Within 3 hours, the alert reached the Imperial Command Center, a massive fortress built into the side of a mountain where the Empire's military leaders made their decisions. Admiral Blake Turner sat in the back of the War Council chamber, as he always did. Humans weren't allowed at the main table. Even though he held the rank of Grand Admiral, even though he'd served the Crithian Empire for 15 years after Earth's conquest, he was still just a conquered species. The Crithians made sure he never forgot that. He watched as the Crithian officers studied the sensor data on the holographic display. The unknown ship appeared as a glowing red dot, steadily moving through their territory like it owned the place. This is clearly a Zelkin weapon, announced Lord Commander Drethkor, his mandibles clicking with certainty. They've been developing new technology. This must be their secret project. Blake wanted to speak up. The energy signature didn't match Zelkin technology at all. It didn't match anything he'd seen in 15 years of studying alien vessels. But he kept his mouth shut. Humans who spoke out of turn usually found themselves reassigned to mining colonies. We cannot allow this intrusion to go unpunished, Drethkor continued. If we appear weak, every lesser species will think they can violate our borders. I recommend we deploy the 7th Fleet immediately. Intercept and destroy. The other Crithian commanders nodded in agreement. Blake felt his stomach tighten. The 7th Fleet was 300 warships strong. Destroyers, cruisers, and battlecruisers. Enough firepower to crack a moon in half. They were sending all of that against one ship. It seemed like overkill. Unless the Crithians were more worried than they were letting on. Make it so, said the Supreme Commander, and just like that, the decision was made. No investigation. No attempt at communication. Just pure military response. That was the Crithian way. They'd been the dominant power in this region of space for 500 years, and they'd gotten comfortable with solving every problem through overwhelming force. Blake watched the fleet commanders file out of the chamber to prepare their ships. He wanted to say something, to suggest they at least try to establish communication first. But what good would it do? The Crithians had made up their minds. As the chamber emptied, Blake pulled up the sensor data on his personal console. He studied the unknown ship's energy signature, its speed, its trajectory. Something about it bothered him. The way it moved, the way its power output fluctuated. It reminded him of something, but he couldn't quite place it. Meanwhile, 300 Crithian warships began launching from orbital shipyards around Crithios Prime. The 7th Fleet was the pride of the Empire's military. They'd crushed rebellions, conquered worlds, and destroyed pirate fleets. Their commander, Lord Drethkor himself, had personally overseen 47 successful military campaigns. The fleet formed up in attack formation and jumped to faster-than-light speed, heading toward the intercept coordinates. They expected to arrive, destroy the intruder, and be home in time for the evening meal. It would be a simple mission. A routine show of force. They had no idea what was waiting for them. Far across the void of space, on the bridge of the UNSC Indomitable, Captain Jack Reynolds was having a very different day. He stood looking at the star charts displayed on the main view screen, a coffee cup in his hand and a slight frown on his face. "Ensign Williams, are you sure we're in the right sector?" he asked. The young navigation officer double-checked her readings. "Yes, sir, coordinates are confirmed. We're exactly where we're supposed to be. This is the region Command wanted us to map." Jack nodded slowly. The Indomitable had been on this deep space reconnaissance mission for 6 months now. 6 long, boring months of jumping from system to system, scanning planets and updating star charts. They hadn't seen another ship in weeks. It was peaceful. Quiet. Exactly the kind of mission that made spacers go stir-crazy from the monotony. "Sir, I'm picking up something odd," called out Lieutenant Rachel Park from the tactical station. "Multiple energy signatures ahead. A lot of them." Jack set down his coffee. "How many is a lot?" "Counting now." Park's fingers danced across her console. "Sir, I'm reading 300 distinct signatures. They're in formation. Military formation." The bridge went quiet. Jack felt every nerve in his body suddenly come alive. 300 ships? Are you certain?" "Confirmed, Captain. And they're moving toward us. Fast." Jack's mind raced. They were supposed to be in empty space. Uncharted territory. There weren't supposed to be any major civilizations out here. That's why Command had sent them to explore. "Weapon status?" he asked, keeping his voice calm. "Railguns are ready, point defense systems online. We're at standard readiness, sir. Red alert. Battle stations." Jack moved to his command chair as alarms began wailing throughout the ship. "Communications, try to establish contact on all frequencies. Every language we know. Mathematical sequences if nothing else works. Show them we're trying to talk." "Aye, sir, broadcasting now." Jack watched the tactical display as his crew scrambled to their stations. 300 ships. 300 unknown, potentially hostile alien vessels were heading right toward them. The Indomitable was tough, one of Earth's newest battleships, but those were terrible odds. "Still no response to our hails, Captain," reported the communications officer. "Keep trying. And somebody figure out who these people are." Jack had a bad feeling about this. A very bad feeling. The Indomitable had been sent out here to make first contact if they found anyone. But this didn't feel like a friendly welcoming committee. This felt like an ambush. The space around the Indomitable suddenly filled with ships. Hundreds of them. They appeared out of nowhere in brilliant flashes of light, materializing from faster-than-light travel like ghosts becoming solid. Within seconds, the human battleship was completely surrounded. Captain Jack Reynolds gripped the armrests of his command chair. He'd seen a lot in his 20 years with the Space Command, but nothing like this. The alien vessels formed a perfect sphere around his ship, blocking every possible escape route. It was textbook military tactics. Overwhelming force, perfect positioning, no way out. On the bridge of the Crithian flagship, Lord Commander Drethkor studied the human vessel with a mixture of curiosity and disdain. The ship looked nothing like proper military vessels should look. There were no graceful curves, no flowing lines, no elegant design. It was just angular metal plates bolted together, covered in odd protrusions and antenna arrays. It looked crude, primitive, almost ugly. "Look at that thing," Drethkor said to his tactical officer, gesturing at the view screen. "It's like someone took scrap metal and hammered it into the shape of a ship. No energy shielding visible. No weapon ports that I can identify. Are we sure this is even a warship?" The tactical officer ran another scan. "The energy signature suggests military-grade power systems, Lord Commander. But their hull composition is strange. It appears to be layered metal alloys. Very thick layers. Almost like they're relying on physical armor instead of energy shields." Drethkor's mandibles clicked in amusement. Physical armor. How backward. The galaxy had moved beyond such crude defensive measures centuries ago. Energy shields could adapt, regenerate, and deflect incoming fire. Metal plates just sat there and took damage until they broke. "This will be over quickly," the tactical officer added. "One volley should be sufficient." Drethkor nodded and opened a communications channel. His words would be broadcast in the standard language of the Empire, the language every conquered species learned to understand. "Unknown vessel, you have violated Crithian space. This is your only warning. Power down all systems immediately and prepare to be boarded. Any resistance will result in your complete destruction. You have 30 seconds to comply." On the Indomitable, the alien message came through as incomprehensible sounds. Lieutenant Rachel Park ran it through every translation program in the database. Nothing matched. The linguistic patterns were completely foreign. "Captain, I can't translate it," she said, frustration clear in her voice. "But listen to the tone. That's not a friendly greeting." Jack didn't need a translation to understand the situation. 300 warships surrounding them, weapons clearly visible and charging with energy. The message was pretty clear regardless of language. "Keep broadcasting," he ordered. "Send everything. Pi, the speed of light, atomic numbers, chemical formulas. Anything that shows we're intelligent and trying to communicate. Maybe they'll realize we're not hostile." "Sir, should I raise shields?" asked the tactical officer. "Shields are already up. And charge the railguns. Bring all weapon systems online." Jack hated giving that order. It felt like admitting they were going to fight. But he had a crew of 200 people depending on him, and he wasn't about to let them die without defending themselves. The 30 seconds ticked down in tense silence. The human ship continued broadcasting mathematical sequences and scientific constants, desperately trying to establish that they were sentient beings seeking peaceful contact. The Crithians continued powering their weapons, seeing only an intruder who refused to surrender. Then the time ran out. "Fire," Drethkor commanded. The space around the Indomitable lit up like a sun-going nova. Plasma bolts erupted from 300 ships simultaneously. Superheated streams of energy, each hot enough to melt through solid rock, converged on the human battleship from every direction. The concentrated firepower could have destroyed a small moon. It was enough energy to vaporize an asteroid. The Indomitable vanished in a sphere of brilliant light. On the Crithian flagship, officers smiled. Target eliminated. Quick and clean, just as expected. But as the plasma dissipated and sensors cleared, their smiles froze. The human ship was still there. Scorched, yes. The outer hull was blackened and smoking. But it was intact. Completely intact. Not even a breach in the armor. "Impossible," Drethkor whispered. On the Indomitable, alarms were screaming. The ship had shuddered violently under the barrage, throwing crew members who weren't strapped into the floor. Warning lights flashed across every console. "Damage report." Jack shouted over the chaos. The damage control officer frantically checked his displays. "Sir, outer armor is scorched. Heat sinks are at 70% capacity. Some sensor arrays are fried. But armor integrity is at 94%. We have no hull breaches. No casualties." Jack couldn't believe what he was hearing. They'd just been hit by enough firepower to crack a planet, and they'd barely been scratched. Earth's engineers had built the Indomitable's armor to withstand nuclear weapons at close range. Layer upon layer of composite metals, ceramic plates, and shock-absorbing materials. It was designed to take punishment and keep fighting. Apparently, it worked better than anyone had expected. "They're charging weapons again," Rachel reported from Tactical. "Same firing pattern." Jack made his decision in a heartbeat. They tried peace. They tried communication. The aliens had responded with overwhelming force. Now his crew was in danger, and he had a responsibility to protect them. Target the nearest ships. Railguns 1 through 4. Minimal force shots. Show them we can defend ourselves. "Sir, are you sure?" Rachel hesitated. "Once we fire, there's no going back." They fired first. They made the choice. Now fire. The Indomitable's railguns activated with a deep thrumming sound that resonated through the ship's hull. Electromagnetic coils charged, building up massive amounts of energy. Then they fired. Railguns were simple weapons. Ancient, really, in terms of concept. They used magnetic fields to accelerate a projectile to incredible speeds. No explosives. No fancy energy beams. Just a solid chunk of tungsten alloy, propelled to 3% the speed of light through sheer electromagnetic force. Simple. Brutal. Devastatingly effective. The first slug left the barrel at 90,000 kilometers per second. It crossed the distance to the nearest Crithian cruiser in a fraction of a second. The kinetic energy was astronomical. When it hit, the projectile punched through the cruiser's energy shield like it wasn't even there. The shield, designed to deflect energy weapons, had no defense against solid matter moving at relativistic speeds. The tungsten slug passed through the ship's hull as if it were paper. It went in one side and out the other, the kinetic impact so powerful that the ship simply came apart. Metal tore, systems exploded, and the cruiser became an expanding cloud of debris. But the projectile didn't stop. It kept going, passing through 2 more ships behind the first target. 3 Crithian vessels destroyed by a single shot. 3 more railgun rounds fired in rapid succession. 12 more ships exploded. On the Crithian flagship, chaos erupted. Shields had no effect. someone screamed. They're using kinetic weapons. Multiple ships destroyed. Drethkor stood frozen watching his fleet die. Kinetic weapons. Physical projectiles. The kind of primitive technology the Empire had abandoned centuries ago because energy shields made them obsolete. Except these projectiles were moving so fast that the shields couldn't stop them. The shields pushed back against energy, not matter. And matter moving at relativistic speeds carried so much force that nothing could stand in its way. All ships, evasive maneuvers, he finally managed to shout. Scatter formation. Get out of range. But Crythian ships were built for power, not speed. They relied on shields for defense, so they never needed to be quick or maneuverable. As they tried to break formation and flee, the Indomitable's targeting computer tracked them with cold precision. More railgun shots. More explosions. Ships that had survived hundreds of battles, that had conquered dozens of worlds, were being torn apart by chunks of metal moving really fast. Cease fire. Drethkor screamed. All ships retreat. Emergency FTL jump. The surviving Crythian vessels didn't need to be told twice. They activated their faster-than-light drives and vanished, leaving behind only debris and bodies. When the space finally cleared, Jack sat back in his chair, his hands shaking. Status. Sir, we expended 16 railgun rounds. Enemy fleet has retreated. We're reading massive debris fields. Estimated enemy casualties. Rachel paused, double-checking her sensors. Sir, we destroyed 167 ships. The bridge went silent. One ship. One human battleship. Against 300 alien warships. And they'd won. But Jack felt no victory. Only dread. Because somewhere out there, those aliens were regrouping. And next time they'd come back with more. A lot more. The Imperial Council chamber was built to intimidate. Massive columns stretched up into darkness, carved with the names of conquered worlds. The ceiling was so high it disappeared into shadows. At the center stood Emperor Draxul's throne, raised on a platform so everyone had to look up at him. Around the room, the most powerful beings in the Crythian Empire waited in tense silence. Lord Commander Drethkor stood in the middle of it all, feeling smaller than he ever had in his life. Behind him, a holographic display showed footage from the battle. Over and over, the recording played. The human ship sitting motionless. The 7th Fleet opening fire. The plasma bolts doing nothing. Then the railgun shots, each one tearing through multiple ships like they were made of paper. The silence stretched on. Nobody wanted to speak first. Finally, Council Member Threx broke it, his voice dripping with disbelief and anger. You expect us to believe this? He demanded, gesturing at the hologram. One ship. One single vessel destroyed half of the 7th Fleet? 300 of our finest warships, and they couldn't handle one enemy? Drethkor kept his voice steady, though inside he was screaming. I have transmitted all tactical data, Council Member. Every sensor reading, every communication attempt, every detail is documented and verified. What you see is exactly what happened. Threxal's skin flushed a darker color, a sign of extreme agitation in Crythians. Then you're either incompetent or a coward. Perhaps both. You should be stripped of rank and... Enough. Emperor Draxul's voice cut through the chamber like a blade. He rose from his throne, his 4 eyes fixed on the hologram. Even at his advanced age, the Emperor was an imposing figure. He'd ruled for 60 years, conquered 23 worlds, and never lost a major military engagement. Until now. What species builds such a vessel? The Emperor asked, studying the human battleship's crude, angular design. Unknown, Your Majesty, Drethkor replied. We have no match in any database. The ship's configuration is unlike anything we've encountered. They've been broadcasting constantly since we first detected them. Our linguists believe the transmissions are mathematical sequences and scientific constants. Possibly attempts at establishing communication. The Emperor's mandibles clicked rapidly, a sign of deep thought or barely controlled rage. Communication? They slaughtered 167 ships and you think they want to talk? Your Majesty, we fired first, Drethkor said carefully. They attempted to broadcast on multiple frequencies before the engagement. They only returned fire after we attacked them. From the shadows at the edge of the chamber, a voice spoke up. It was quiet, respectful, but it still made every Crythian in the room turn their heads in shock. Conquered species didn't speak in Imperial Council meetings. Ever. Admiral Blake Turner stepped forward slightly, still mostly in the shadows where humans were required to stand during official meetings. He'd served the Empire for 15 years after Earth's conquest, working his way up through the ranks despite the prejudice he faced every single day. He knew speaking now could mean his death. But he couldn't stay silent. Not when he suspected what that ship might be. "Your Majesty, if I may," Blake said, keeping his eyes lowered in the submissive posture required of conquered species. Perhaps they were defending themselves. We entered their sensor range first. We surrounded them without attempting communication. We fired the first shots. From their perspective, we were the aggressors. The temperature in the chamber seemed to drop 10 degrees. Every eye turned toward Blake. Some looks were angry. Others were shocked that a human dared speak. Threxel looked like he wanted to tear Blake apart with his bare claws. "The human speaks out of turn," Threxel hissed, moving toward Blake with clear hostile intent. "This is highly irregular. Perhaps this entire situation is a human conspiracy. Perhaps Turner's people built this weapon. Perhaps he's a traitor working against the Empire." Blake stood his ground, though his heart was pounding. "Council member, that's impossible. Earth's most advanced warships can barely reach point 2 light speed. The vessel you encountered was moving at point 8. Our weapons technology is nowhere near capable of what you witnessed. We don't have railguns that powerful. We don't have armor that can withstand sustained plasma fire. Whoever built that ship, it wasn't Earth." "Then who?" Threxal demanded. "You seem very knowledgeable about this mystery vessel, human." Drethkor intervened before things could escalate further. "He's telling the truth about Earth's technology. I've reviewed their capabilities extensively. This ship is far beyond anything humanity possesses. But the design philosophy..." He paused, considering his words. "The design philosophy does resemble human engineering. Simple, brutal, effective. No elegance, just function." Emperor Draxol waved his hand dismissively, clearly tired of the debate. "It doesn't matter who built it. It doesn't matter what they intended. What matters is what happened. They entered our territory. They killed our warriors. They made the Empire look weak in front of every species we rule." He turned to face the full council, his voice rising with authority. "If we do nothing, what message does that send? Every conquered world will see this as proof that the Empire can be challenged. Every rebellious faction will gain courage. Every rival power will sense weakness. We cannot allow this to stand." The Emperor pointed at the hologram of the human battleship. "Assemble the Grand Armada. Every available ship. I want 2,000 vessels ready to deploy within 3 days. I will personally lead this fleet. We will find this intruder, we will destroy it, and we will make an example that the entire galaxy will remember for 1,000 years." The council members nodded in agreement, already planning the logistics of such a massive deployment. Blake felt his stomach drop. 2,000 ships. The largest armada the Empire had assembled in decades. Against one vessel that had already proven it could devastate their forces. This wasn't going to be a battle. It was going to be a massacre. The only question was which side would be massacred. Blake stepped forward again, knowing he was risking everything. "Your Majesty, please. At least allow me to attempt communication first. If this is a misunderstanding, if they truly were just defending themselves, then attacking them again will only..." Silence. The Emperor's roar echoed off the stone walls. He descended from his throne, moving toward Blake with frightening speed for someone his age. "You forget your place, human. You are here because we permit it. Because your species was useful enough to integrate rather than exterminate. But do not mistake our mercy for equality." The Emperor's face was inches from Blake's now. "The Empire does not negotiate with those who kill our people. We do not bow to threats. We do not show weakness. We crush those who oppose us and we make sure everyone watches." He turned back to the council. "If this mysterious ship has allies, we will destroy them too. If they have a homeworld, we will reduce it to ash. And when we're done, every species in this galaxy will remember why the Crithian Empire has ruled for 500 years." The council session ended with orders flying in every direction. Ship commanders were summoned. Supplies were requisitioned. The entire military machine of the Empire began mobilizing for war. Blake was escorted back to his quarters by guards, technically not under arrest but clearly being watched. As soon as he was alone, he pulled up his personal terminal and accessed what limited information he had about the mysterious ship. The design. The weapons. The tactics. Something about it felt familiar. Not Earth technology, no. Earth couldn't build something that advanced. But the philosophy behind it, the approach to warfare, that felt human. What if it wasn't Earth? What if it was humans from somewhere else? A lost colony ship that had traveled farther than anyone knew? A group that had developed independently? Time travelers from Earth's future? The possibilities made his head spin. But one thing was certain. If that ship was crewed by humans and if the Empire destroyed it and then traced its origin, every human in the galaxy was in danger. The Empire wouldn't distinguish between different human factions. They'd see all of humanity as a threat. Blake made a decision. He couldn't stop the Grand Armada from launching. He didn't have that kind of authority. But maybe, just maybe, he could get a warning to that ship. Maybe he could help them understand what was coming. It would mean treason. It would mean betraying the Empire he'd served for 15 years. It would probably mean his death. But it might save billions of lives. Human lives. He began typing, composing a message he prayed would reach the Indomitable before 2,000 warships did. Catherine hadn't slept in 32 hours. Her eyes burned from staring at screens, her fingers ached from typing, and her two hearts beat rapidly from consuming too much stimulant. But she couldn't stop. She was so close to cracking the code. The cramped quarters aboard the Imperial Intelligence vessel weren't designed for comfort. As a junior linguist, she got a tiny cabin with a fold-down bunk, a small desk, and walls so thin she could hear the hum of the ship's engines constantly. But right now she didn't care about comfort. She cared about the truth. The human transmissions were unlike anything in the galactic database. She'd compared them against every known language pattern from 300 different species. Nothing matched. The syntax was unique. The phonetic structures were completely foreign. This wasn't just a new dialect of something known. This was a completely isolated language family, suggesting the species had developed far from any known civilization. But mathematics was universal. Physics didn't change based on what language you spoke. And these humans had been broadcasting mathematical constants, chemical formulas, and scientific principles non-stop since they'd been detected. Catherine had been working backward from those universal concepts, using them as a key to unlock the language structure. It was painstaking work, like solving a puzzle where most of the pieces were missing. But slowly, pattern by pattern, word by word, she was building a translation matrix. At hour 31 she had a breakthrough. The grammatical structure suddenly made sense. At hour 32 she successfully translated her first complete sentence. Her hands trembled as she applied the translation matrix to the earliest human transmission, the very first message they'd sent when they detected the Crithian fleet approaching. The translated text appeared on her screen, and Catherine felt both her hearts freeze in her chest. To whom it may concern, we are explorers from the planet Earth, representing the United Nations Space Command. We come in peace and mean no harm. We have entered this region of space on a scientific mission to map uncharted territories. We do not understand why we were attacked. Please respond so we may establish peaceful contact and resolve this situation without further conflict. By the ancients, Catherine whispered into the empty room. She scrolled through more transmissions, translating them frantically. Every single one said the same thing in different ways. Exploration. Confusion. Desperate pleas to communicate. They'd been trying to talk since the very beginning. And the Empire had responded with weapons fire. Catherine grabbed her datapad and ran from her quarters, not caring that her uniform was rumpled or that she looked half dead from exhaustion. This couldn't wait. She had to tell someone. She had to make them understand what they were about to do. The Grand Armada had assembled in formation. 2,000 warships, the largest military force the Empire had gathered in 50 years. They filled the space around the staging area like a swarm of metallic insects, all bristling with weapons, all ready for war. On the flagship, Emperor Draxel stood in the war room surrounded by his top military commanders. They were reviewing the attack plan, discussing firing patterns and approach vectors. The mood was confident, almost celebratory. With this much firepower, victory was certain. Catherine burst through the door without waiting for permission to enter. Protocol demanded she request an audience, wait for approval, announce herself properly. But there was no time for protocol. "Your Majesty," she gasped, out of breath from running. "I've translated their language. You need to see this. You need to read what they've been saying." Emperor Draxel turned slowly, his expression cold. "We did not assemble 2,000 ships to have a conversation, linguist. The intruders will be destroyed. Whatever they have to say is irrelevant. But Majesty, the translation clearly shows they're peaceful explorers. They came here by accident. They don't even know who we are. They've been begging us to communicate since the moment we detected them. Please just read the report. I don't care what it shows." The Emperor slammed his appendage on the tactical table with enough force to make the holographic display flicker. "They killed our warriors. 167 ships. Thousands of crew members. They've made us appear weak before every lesser species in the Empire. If we back down now, every conquered world will see it as proof they can rebel against us. Sathrin's voice rose in desperation. Then you're executing them for defending themselves against our unprovoked attack? We fired first, Your Majesty. We surrounded them without warning. We gave them no chance to explain. They only fought back because we gave them no choice. The war room went deadly silent. Every officer turned to stare at her. Several hands moved toward weapons. Challenging the Emperor's decision was bad enough. Doing it in front of his military command was suicide. Council member Threxel stepped forward, his skin flushed dark with anger. You forget your place, linguist? Junior officers do not question the Emperor's judgment. Especially not in matters of military necessity. But before he could continue, another voice spoke up from the side of the room. Admiral Blake Turner had been standing quietly in the corner, as conquered species were expected to do during command meetings. Now he stepped forward into the light. She's right, Blake said simply. I've reviewed the complete battle data from Lord Commander Drethkor's engagement. The timeline is clear. We detected their ship. We surrounded it without attempting communication. We fired the first shots. They responded with what appears to be minimal force, only targeting ships that continued to fire on them. When we retreated, they ceased fire immediately and resumed broadcasting peace messages. Threxel rounded on Blake, practically spitting with rage. The human and the linguist conspire together. How convenient. Perhaps this entire situation is human treachery. Perhaps Turner has been planning this for years. If it were human treachery, there'd be more than one ship, Blake countered calmly. Earth doesn't have this technology. Our fastest vessels can barely reach .2 light speed. Our weapons can't punch through your shields like that. I don't know where this ship came from, but I can tell you with absolute certainty it's not from the Earth you conquered. Then where? Demanded another officer. Where did they come from? I don't know, Blake admitted. Maybe a lost colony that traveled farther than we knew was possible. Maybe they're from a parallel dimension. Maybe they're time travelers from humanity's future. But does it matter? Look at their messages. Look at their actions. They're not invaders. They're explorers who stumbled into our territory and defended themselves when we attacked without warning. Emperor Draxel studied Blake for a long moment, his 4 eyes unblinking. You would have me appear weak before the entire empire? Before the galaxy? You would have me back down from a fight we've already committed to? I would have you appear wise, Your Majesty, Blake said carefully. Strong enough to admit when a mistake has been made. Smart enough to prevent a tragedy that could haunt the empire for generations. Tragedy? The Emperor laughed, a harsh clicking sound. The only tragedy will be theirs when 2,000 ships reduce them to atoms. Blake pressed on, knowing he was likely signing his own death warrant. Your Majesty, think about what happens after. That ship will have a homeworld. We'll have allies. When you destroy it, you're declaring war on an entire species. A species that, based on what we've seen, might be able to fight back in ways we're not prepared for. One ship destroyed half our 7th fleet, Sathrin added quickly. Their weapons ignore our shields. Their armor resists our plasma fire. What if they have 100 such ships? 1,000? What if attacking them brings a war to the Empire's doorstep that we cannot win? Enough. Draxel's roar echoed off the walls. I have made my decision. The attack will proceed as planned. Guards, escort the linguist and the human to confinement. They are clearly compromised and will not be permitted to interfere further. As guards moved to grab them, Sathrin managed to quickly transfer her translation data to her personal datapad. Blake saw the movement and gave her a subtle nod of understanding. They were led away in restraints, but the truth was out there now. Other officers had heard. Other linguists would verify Sathrin's work. The human messages would spread through the fleet's communication network. And somewhere on that network, someone with a conscience might do the right thing. In their shared holding cell, Blake and Sathrin worked quickly. Blake had been preparing for a moment like this for years. He pulled a small device from a hidden compartment in his boot. Magnetic pulse generator, he explained quietly. Primitive Earth technology. No fancy quantum encryption to crack. It'll open this door in about 30 seconds. The lock clicked. They moved through empty corridors toward a secondary communications array. If I broadcast this translation data, they'll trace it immediately, Sathrin warned. Do it anyway, Blake said. Those humans deserve to know what's coming. Sathrin transmitted everything in a compressed burst, including a personal message. You are about to be attacked by 2,000 ships. Your only chance is to make them understand you come in peace. Show them who you are. Make them see. A friend. Alarms blared. Guards rushed toward them. Go! Blake shouted, pushing Sathrin toward an escape pod. Get off the ship. Find someone who'll listen. What about you? Blake smiled sadly. Someone needs to buy you time. Now go. As Sathrin's pod ejected into space, Blake stood his ground against the approaching guards. He'd served the Empire for 15 years. But some things were more important than duty. Some things were worth dying for. Lord Commander Drethkor stood at his command station, watching 2,000 warships move into attack formation. He'd been demoted after the 7th Fleet disaster. No longer leading from the front, he was relegated to tactical advisory. A support role. A punishment disguised as reassignment. But Emperor Draxel still valued his experience, even if he'd never admit it publicly. The censor officer reported in a calm, professional voice. The human ship is holding position, Lord Commander. They're not attempting to flee. No evasive maneuvers. No course corrections. Council member Threxel, standing beside the Emperor, laughed darkly. Fools. They think one ship can face 2,000? Their arrogance will be their end. But Drethkor studied the tactical display with growing unease. Something felt very wrong about this situation. The human vessel just sat there in space, completely motionless. All weapons were powered down. Their shields were at minimum. They weren't positioning for battle. They weren't preparing defensive maneuvers. What they were doing was broadcasting. On every frequency imaginable. Images flickered across the communication channels. A blue and green planet covered in water and continents. Cities filled with billions of beings who looked remarkably similar to the humans the Empire had conquered decades ago. Families, children, art and music, scientific achievements, mathematical proofs. They weren't preparing to fight. They were preparing to die. And they were spending their last moments showing the galaxy who they were. Majesty, Drethkor spoke carefully, knowing he was risking further disgrace. Perhaps we should reconsider. They're not behaving like an enemy force. They're broadcasting their culture, their homeworld there. Begin the attack, Emperor Draxel commanded, cutting him off. The weapons officers began charging their systems. 2,000 ships preparing to fire simultaneously. It would be the most overwhelming display of military power the Empire had unleashed in half a century. But before the order to fire could be executed, every communication channel suddenly erupted with a new transmission. It overrode all other signals, broadcasting on military frequencies, civilian networks, even the Emperor's private channel. All Crithian vessels, this is Admiral Blake Turner. The voice was human, speaking perfect Crithian. Formerly Admiral of Earth's United Defense Fleet. Currently serving the Empire as military liaison. I am human. The species you are about to destroy is MY species. Emperor Draxel's 4 eyes widened in shock and rage. How is he broadcasting? He's in detention. Cut that transmission immediately. But Blake's voice continued, calm and steady despite knowing he was probably sealing his own death warrant. That ship you see is called the Indomitable. It's from Earth. A planet so far from here that we didn't even know you existed. They're not invaders. They're explorers. Scientists mapping unknown space. And you're about to murder 200 innocent people for the crime of defending themselves when you attacked first. Silence him, the Emperor roared. I've served the Empire for 15 years, Blake continued, his voice carrying across thousands of ships. I've helped you conquer 6 worlds. I told myself I was bringing order to the galaxy. Bringing civilization. But if this is what the Empire does, if this is who we really are, then I'm ashamed of every single day I wore this uniform. The transmission cut off abruptly as guards finally reached Blake's location. But the damage was done. The Emperor's bridge crew exchanged uncertain glances. Across the Armada, officers hesitated. Some began quietly reviewing the battle data from the 7th Fleet engagement. Others pulled up the translation files that had been leaking through the fleet's network for the past hour. The seed of doubt had been planted. Aboard the Indomitable, Captain Jack Reynolds stood on his bridge, watching 2,000 alien warships hold position just outside weapons range. His crew was silent, tense, waiting for the end. They're not attacking, Lieutenant Rachel Park observed quietly. Something's happening over there. Maybe our message finally got through, suggested Ensign Williams, though she didn't sound convinced. Or maybe they're just getting a better firing solution, Jack replied grimly. Keep broadcasting. If these are our last moments, I want them to know we came in peace. Then a new transmission arrived. This one was different. It came through on the translation frequency that mysterious linguist had provided. A single Crithian voice, speaking in halting but understandable English. Human vessel indomitable. This is Lord Commander Drethkor. I commanded the fleet that first attacked you. I believe I made a terrible mistake. Jack's heart leaped. He grabbed the communications console. This is Captain Jack Reynolds. We're listening. What followed was the most surreal conversation of Jack's life. Drethkor explained the Empire's perspective, their fear, their assumption that any unknown ship was hostile. Jack explained humanity's peaceful intentions, their confusion, their desperate attempts to communicate. And slowly, carefully they began to understand each other. I want to propose something, Drethkor said after several minutes. Something that might save both our peoples. But it's going to require trust. And it's going to be dangerous. I'm listening, Jack replied. Drethkor outlined his plan. It was insane. It was risky. It could go wrong in 100 different ways. But Jack saw the logic in it. Sometimes you had to take a leap of faith. We'll do it, Jack decided. But if this is a trick. If this is a trick, Commander, you'll destroy enough of our fleet before you die that the Empire will never forget it. I know that. The Emperor knows that. Everyone knows that now. 3 days later, Emperor Draxol stood on his flagship's observation deck, preparing to give the final attack order. The delay had been humiliating, but necessary to reposition forces after Blake's transmission had caused confusion in the ranks. Lord Commander Drethkor approached, requesting one final audience before the attack commenced. Majesty, before you act, I want to show you something. With your permission, I'd like the humans to demonstrate their capabilities. I've seen their capabilities, Draxol growled. Half my 7th fleet is debris. Not like this, Majesty. Please, just watch. At Drethkor's signal, the Indomitable fired a single railgun shot. The tungsten slug screamed through space at 3% light speed. It passed within 3 meters of the Emperor's flagship. So close that the entire ship shuddered from the shockwave. So close that everyone on the observation deck could see it streak past the window. The projectile continued on its path, striking a small asteroid 30,000 kilometers away. The asteroid exploded into powder. Every Crithian on the bridge froze. That shot could have killed them all. At that range, at that speed, they would have had no time to react. The humans had deliberately missed. A second shot followed, passing 3 meters from the ship's opposite side. Then a third from above. A fourth from below. The Indomitable traced a perfect three-dimensional box around the Emperor's flagship, each shot missing by exactly the same microscopic margin. 5, 6, 7, 8, Drethkor counted calmly. They're demonstrating something, Majesty. They could destroy every ship in this armada individually, and we'd never land a single hit in return. Our shields don't stop their weapons. Our ships are too slow to evade. But they don't want to fight. They want to talk. Emperor Draxol's hands shook. In 60 years of rule, he'd never felt truly vulnerable. Until now. This is their idea of negotiation? No, Majesty. This is them showing restraint. If they wanted to negotiate from strength, you'd already be dead. Captain Reynolds's voice came over the communication channel, speaking perfect Crithian thanks to the translation matrix. Emperor Draxol, I'm Captain Jack Reynolds of Earth. My weapons are now powered down completely. My shields are lowered. I'm transmitting our ship's full technical specifications and our complete cultural database. Everything about humanity. Our history, our mistakes, our hopes, our dreams. I'm making us completely vulnerable because that's what trust looks like. He paused, and when he spoke again there was emotion in his voice. We didn't come here looking for war. We came looking for wonder. We wanted to know if we were alone in the universe. Well, we found out. We're not alone. The question now is whether we can be neighbors and friends, or whether we'll be enemies forever. That choice is yours, Emperor. Choose wisely. The data streamed in. Draxol watched images of Earth flash across his screens. A planet so similar to Crithios Prima was startling. Oceans and continents. Cities and wilderness. Families raising children. Artists creating beauty. Scientists pushing boundaries. And yes, warriors fighting wars. But also peacemakers ending them. They're so young as a species, the Emperor murmured. Barely 1,000 years of recorded history. Children compared to us. Children with very sharp teeth, Drethkor noted. Majesty, in 40 days more human ships will arrive. 12 more vessels just like this one. If they find wreckage and bodies, Earth will assume we're hostile. They'll send more ships. Eventually they'll send everything they have. Based on what I've seen, we'll lose that war. You think they could conquer the Empire? I think they could make us regret ever finding them. But I also think Drethkor gestured at the incoming cultural data. I think they could teach us things we've forgotten. They almost destroyed themselves with war but chose peace instead. We're heading down that same path, becoming more aggressive, more paranoid. Maybe it's time we learned from someone else's mistakes. Emperor Draxel stood silent for a long time, staring at the human ship. Finally he spoke. Open a channel to all ships. Stand down battle protocols. He took a deep breath. And open a channel to Captain Reynolds. It seems we should talk. 40 days later, Earth's second fleet dropped out of FTL at the coordinates where the Indomitable had called for help 3 months earlier. Admiral Robert Cole expected to find debris or an active battle. Instead, his sensors showed something impossible. Sir, the Indomitable is intact. All crew alive. And there are over 2,000 alien vessels around her. None showing hostile intent. Life signs on the Indomitable? All accounted for, sir. And we're receiving a transmission. It's Captain Reynolds. Jack's face appeared on screen and he was actually smiling. Admiral Cole, welcome to Crythian space. Sorry about the dramatic distress call. Things have changed quite a bit since then. I'd like to introduce you to Emperor Draxel and Lord Commander Drethkor. We've spent the last 40 days in what I believe is humanity's first successful diplomatic negotiation with an alien civilization. Cole sputtered in disbelief. Diplomatic? Your message said hostile contact. It was, sir. Very hostile. But we talked it out. Jack's expression grew serious. Admiral, we've been invited to their capital world for formal first contact ceremonies. They want peace with Earth. They're also offering a technology exchange. They're faster-than-light drives for our defensive technology and engineering knowledge. They want our weapons? A Crythian face appeared beside Jack's, translator rendering his words in English. We want to learn from a species that nearly destroyed itself but chose peace instead. You have wisdom we've lost. And yes, your technology is impressive. But more than that, we want to avoid making you our enemies. The Empire has been humbled. It's unfamiliar, but perhaps necessary. Over the following months, humanity and the Crythian Empire built a cautious but growing relationship. Humans learned they weren't alone. The Crythians learned that size doesn't equal superiority. Blake Turner was released and became Earth's first ambassador to the Empire. The linguist Sathrin studied at Earth's universities, helping decode dozens of alien languages. The Indomitable returned home a legend. Jack downplayed his role. We were just trying not to die. Turns out sometimes the best weapon is knowing when to lower it. But Earth's military took notes. They built more ships like the Indomitable. Because while first contact succeeded, the galaxy was vast and full of unknowns. Other empires watched humanity's debut with great interest. The Empire's worst fear wasn't the battleship. It was what it represented. Change, challenge, the end of unchallenged dominance. Sometimes the scariest thing isn't an enemy you can fight. It's a neighbor who forces you to become better.